Hello and welcome to Mirror Realm. My name's Nick, known as Wyvern on the Discord servers. Today I got Jared with me and we're finally doing the limited play series. We're going to break... Oh, sorry Jared, I'll let you say hello.
It's alright, just hello.
I didn't mean to cut you off there. Right, Jared doesn't actually even know what we're doing. I thought this would be the best way to just make it completely organic. I'm going to go over now what we're planning to do. So I'm planning that this would be a 4-part series. The first part, which would obviously be this part, we're going to just talk about stuff at like a sort of a theoretical level about how we conceptualize cards, about how we assess which cards are good, which cards are not so good, and why. We're going to talk about floors, ceilings, and of cards. We're going to talk about the mean or the median or the average performance of cards. We're going to bring all of that together, and we're actually going to use a system to rate every ordinary in the set in regards to floors and ceilings and medians, and at some kind of base level, and we'll put strict criteria on how those ratings are being given so that we can do it accurately but under that criteria. And time permitting, maybe we'll do the exceptionals as well. In the second episode, we'll apply all of that conceptual knowledge to some sealed deck exercises where we take some card pools and we build what we believe the best deck is from those. In the third episode, we'll go through some drafts and apply that same conceptual knowledge to drafting the cards, but also some other tips, tricks, information, and so on and so forth about the draft experience specifically. And in the fourth episode, we'll focus on actual limited play. How does that sound as a 4-part series to you, Jared?
Sounds alright. I reckon the first video is going to be a bit longer than expected.
Well, we'll see. It's okay if the first one's longer.
How many ordinaries are there?
Let's have a look now. There's only 50-something. 55, I believe. No, 56. It's one out.
No, shouldn't be too bad then.
56 ordinaries.
Does that have 4 ordinary sites for draft? Or no, it doesn't, great, because they're not aiming the actual
set. So they're not, So yeah. We'll probably, obviously, with us, no doubt, we'll be at over 3 hours by the time we've finished talking about the ordinaries. So it probably will just be the ordinaries, but we'll see. What I'm thinking then is we'll see how we go for the sealed, and we'll talk about that in the second episode specifically. But for now, let's lay out the criteria for how we think about cards, and then we'll have some open discussion about that now, and then we can formalize how we're actually going to rate these ordinary cards now. I know in a lot of the stuff that we've done, we talk about floors and ceilings of cards, and loosely what those mean. But in pretty simple terms, the floor is like the worst case performance as such that a card would perform, and the ceiling is the best. But that's not really what we mean when we talk about it. It's not the theoretical best it can ever be, because if you apply that, basically every card under some very specific hypothetical situation could be like 100 out of 100 basically, right? If the stars align and it's the exact board state for that card to win the game, then it's the best. You could construct like a theoretical situation, right, where Blacksmith Family is like the only card you conceivably could have drawn to win you the game type of thing.
Yeah, you could do like puzzle scenarios where every card has like, is the exact card you need sort of thing.
So that's not what we mean when we're talking about the ceiling of a card. It's more like a spectrum where I guess you could say, for argument's sakes, that let's say you played 100 times and then you ranked that card's performance. Well, you played 100 times and actually drew that card like in 100 times in game. So you're obviously going to have to play more than 100 games for that to be true. But in the 100 games that you actually get the card, you would sort of rank, let's say, give it a score out of 10 for each game, let's say, or a score out of 100, whatever you want to say, how it performed from best to worst across those 100 games. And when we're talking about the ceiling of a card, we're not really talking about how it did in the 100, like in the best out of 100. we're more talking about, let's say, like in percentiles, right? Like, how is it if you take its top 10% of performances? Like, how good is it? Top 20% type of thing. That's more what we're talking about when we talk about the ceiling. So, and the same as a floor, right? Like, basically every card can not be a very good card under certain circumstances, right? It can be a totally horrible card. Like, you're about to lose the game and you draw it and it doesn't help you not lose the game, right? So it's terrible. But again, we're not talking about the worst that any card can theoretically be. And obviously, basically, every card that has a cost associated with it can be terrible if you can't actually cast it, right? Pretty much.
Yeah, I think the more threshold requirements on a card, the lower the floor gets, realistically.
Yeah. So that's an important thing. So what I'm proposing, I've thought about this quite a bit. So I'll propose to you how we'll rate the cards, and then maybe we tweak it if you're not entirely happy with it. So what I'm thinking is we take the top, let's say the third out of 10 best performance, let's say. And that's what when we're calling it a ceiling, what we're really talking about is the third best performance out of 10 games, right? Or the 30th best out of 100 games, however you want to cut it, right? So if we would rate a card and would say, how good is it in its 30th best performance out of 100 games, 100 theoretical games? And when we're talking about the floor, what we're really talking about is the 30th worst game out of 100 games. And if we're talking about, on average, how well does it do, how well it does, we're talking about, around the middle, 50th best or so. And that way we could, for example, you could look at something like Brown Bears and Limited, and, that's going to be pretty highly scored under all three of those metrics, right? 30th best, 50th best, 70th best, or 30th worst, right?
Yeah.
And then additionally, we would be having to judge it, because the other thing with all of these cards is that you would have these three metrics, but ultimately they would all be modified by all the other cards you have, right? Basically. So, yeah. And potentially even in draft, the cards you don't have. So an example of this would be if you open up a pack and it's got a fox. What's the fox called again? Sly Fox, yeah. But in that same pack is a red best Robin, right? All of a sudden the floor is a lot lower for the fox, because the Robin can just kill it. So if you take the fox and pass the Robin, then somebody's got a card that answers your fox, right? So it's obviously still a fox. It's still pretty good, but it's just not as good, right? Than if there was one less Robin floating around in the draft, right? So effectively, these numbers would get modified by the cards in your card pool, but also the cards that are in everybody else's card pool to a much lesser degree, right?
But for the rankings themselves, we're not factoring that in, right?
No. So how I propose we rank them for now is we conceptualize it like it's the first pack in a draft. Yeah? First pick, first pack. But also that, for the purpose of this exercise, we don't know what the other 14 cards are, right? They can be anything.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
And then what we can do is, when we're talking about the sealed and the draft later on, we can go back to these numbers that we do, and we can say, actually, this number is now... We can look at the cards in the pack, and we can say, yeah, but these numbers are modified because of reasons, basically, right?
Yeah, okay.
And then the idea here is, in the end, that the decks that we build should punch pretty high in these numbers, right? These three rating systems, right? Because obviously when you're constructing the deck, part of what you're trying to do here is you're trying to raise the floor, the median, and the ceiling of all the cards in the deck because of the other cards, because they combine well, right?
Yes.
So you're trying to create a lot of synergy, and then that's going to raise those numbers for a lot of cards. There's certain cards that just obviously...
Yeah, sort of like a multiplier, like a combo bonus. Something
like that, yep. And then we can talk about that when we get to that point, right? But for now, we're just basically just creating the baseline. And that baseline is... It's the first pick in the draft. You have no other cards. So you're assessing on that basis, right? So, for example, if it's got double thresholds, you're assessing on that basis.
That sort of parameters doesn't really go card by card either, because that if it's like first pick of the draft, and you're like, because there's other cards in the draft, right? You're not particularly always just comparing power to power. It's like a lot of the time the first pick of the draft is considering like things that you're passing as well. So push the person next to you into a certain element or things like that.
Exactly,
So,
but we can.
I don't know if
But we can cover that in the draft episode. That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, but I mean, the way you just said it, it sounded like, it's going to be pick one, pack one, and no consideration to the other 14 cards that are in the pack is
exactly
how you want to do it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no other real way to do a baseline. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because obviously those other 14 cards matter, like you're saying, but we can talk about how they matter and why and how.
Yeah,
when we do in the draft episode, right? So for now, we're effectively just trying to create in this episode. We're creating the baseline of everything that we can then talk about in the other episodes. This is the idea here. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
So today's all about just baselines of everything.
I got what you were saying. I was just like, the way you said it sort of wasn't like perfectly clear for people watching, I think. So I just wanted to clarify that just so that, there's like a clear, exact meaning of what we're talking about.
Yeah. Right. Is there anything else we need to cover off here before we get into it? We can certainly maybe we talk a little bit more about the floor, ceiling, and that bit a little bit more before we start.
Yeah. I just sort of want to say, I think the value, the floor value of a card is probably more important than the high end value of the card. I think for just consistency for when you're playing out the draft itself. Because if you have a really low floor and a really high ceiling, you're probably going to end up going 1-2 in most drafts. Whereas if you go the vice versa, the worst you're going to do is probably 2-1. With just pure consistency. So overall, I think the floor is probably more value than the ceiling.
Oh, well, if you're good at the game, the caveat is if you're good at the game. I think if you're not very good at the game, you're probably better off going for ceilings, right? And just hoping that you win off the back of raw power of cards. But the better you get at the game, the more you want to leverage your skill, and by focusing around cards with high floors. Obviously, the best cards are the ones that have both high floors and ceilings, right? But
yeah, absolutely. I was just sort of meaning in for when you come out to an actual point value for what a card is at the end of
sure,
when you work out ceiling, floor, median, and then it's sort of the floor could potentially be worth more than the ceiling. But what you say about
we can get to that after, but because I don't even know if you need a necessarily points value, right? You can just look at this deck and you can just say the floor of this deck is this, right? The median is this and the ceiling is this. So you don't necessarily have to.
When we're rating each card, though?
We'll be rating each card in the deck according to those three metrics, but then you could just average out all the cards in the deck, right? To then assign post modifications when you've modified everything for all the other cards in the deck.
Oh, are we drafting a deck in this?
No,
I thought we're just drafting. We're just ranking all the cards. So don't they need to have a rank for?
No. We're not ranking them. So So let's be clear. Okay, so we're going to give each card a score. Let's not conflate things way more complicated.
To work out the score.
But from 1 to 10 for floor, median, and ceiling for each card, 1 to 10. But we're not ranking the cards absolutely.
And then just have 3 scores.
Yeah, it's not a tier list though.
Just having 3 separate scores.
Yeah, just 3 separate scores. Yeah.
Card.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're not. This isn't about telling people what the best card is, right? This is about how to conceptualize things. Because what the best card is, it depends, right? Depends on everything.
Yeah.
It depends on factors. So this isn't like a tier list or anything. It is just what it is, right? We're just going to rate the cards: floor, median, ceiling, and that by the definitions, where ceiling isn't really ceiling. So an example of this would be, as in not the best possible that it can be, right? We're saying it's the third best out of 10 games that you play, or the 30th best out of 100, right? It's the top 30th percentile. That's what I think we go with. Because, for example, there are certain cards that they would. There's other factors here, and we can get to that. And maybe cards get bonus points, and we can talk about it. Maybe we'll see how we go as we go along. For example, we played a few drafts back, and basically Lookout won you the game. I don't know if you remember that one.
Yeah, I do remember, yeah.
Now, I'm trying to remember exactly what I had in my hand, but I was on the play, and I just had a hand that just would have steamrolled.
you had like a 2-drop into Sword and Shield into something else, and I like the way my hand played out was if I didn't have the Lookout, I would have played out a 2-drop and gotten like blown out by Sword and Shield, and then never been able to deal with the Sword and Shield for the whole game. But because of the way because I saw the way your hand was going to play out, I got to play in like a completely different like line of play that actually ended up baiting you into doing things that made me win the game. So I can't remember exactly what I did, but I remember your side of it.
Yeah. So under that, I guess that card basically won. Now, does that mean that the ceiling of a Lookout is 10 out of 10? Probably not. It's very good. We really rate the card, but so that, you know, we there needs to be a method where you're not saying, yeah, it's going to win you 1 in X games like that outright, right? But it's not 3 in 10 that it's going to win you outright like that. So maybe rather than the third best out of 10 games, instead we just say it's the average of the top half of the games, right? So you take the 5 best games out of 10 and you just average how good it's likely to be in those games. Maybe that could be the definition of the ceiling. We need some definition though, right? Because if for example you're rating the Lookout, it's third best out of 10 games, let's say for argument's sakes it's a 7 or a 6, right? Maybe more. Let's just say 7. But in that specific game it was a 10, right? So
yeah.
It will be the case if you're good at the game that Lookout will just single-handedly win you games. Now, probably a little bit less so in Limited than Constructed, but still it'll just outright win you games. And if you're good at the game, this is a caveat, it's not a very good card, again, if you can't leverage the information.
I think it's more likely to win you more games in Limited than it is Constructed, to be honest. Because in Constructed, you have like, if you know the meta roughly, like you have more, like you'll know more what's in your opponent's deck/hand than exactly what it is in Draft. You know, roughly, I think more often. So I think it's actually better in Limited than it is Constructed.
It's very good in both. Yeah.
So,
but ultimately we need to formalize a definition, otherwise, because we can't be having this complicated. Look, you can't have this conversation with every single card, right? So we just have to come up with the definition and just roll with it. So I think we either basically say the top 25th out of 100 games or the top 30th out of 100 games, or we say it's the average of the top half of the performances or something. Do you have a feeling what you prefer?
Probably average of the top 25th, I guess. Probably signifies the top end a little bit more, I think.
The average of the top... Yeah. But the thing is, it's also... Like, you don't... Yeah. Well, I think it's more just that if you're focusing too much on that one game if it single-handedly wins, that's different, right? So, especially if it's a free include, like Lookout is.
Yeah.
There's no real downside to that. But my concern here really is that you don't want to focus. You don't want the focus to move towards hypothetical situations that rarely occur that make the card good, right? Like
maybe it's the ceiling is in realistic scenarios. Like, you know, how good it is in realistic scenarios.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean by realistic. I mean, every scenario is realistic if it can happen, but this is why we're talking about in terms of if you take the 25th best out of 100 or whatever, you basically cut. Because it isn't about the. I don't want the measure to be the ceiling as such. I want the measure to just be when it's good, how good is it, right? When it's bad, how bad is it, and how is it on average? So floor and ceiling are misleading terms, and maybe we shouldn't use them. Maybe it should just be good game rating, bad game rating, average game rating. Maybe that's easier to conceptualize, right? So the definition of good game rating is just the 25th best game out of 100 games, right? How well does it do? Yeah?
Yeah.
And the bad game rating is just the 25th worst game out of 100 games. How bad did it do? And then it's like in the middle, right? 50th. I know that 50 isn't in the middle, like it's technically 50.5 or whatever, but point remains here. Top quarter, bottom quarter, smack bang in the middle, right? On those lines, how well is it? Let's go with that. You good with that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, all right. So we'll just do the ordinaries to start with. I don't know if you want to maybe have some order.
The way to sort it is to just go. If you just sort by element, ordinary, and then click on everything except for sight and avatar. So minion, magic, aura, artifact, and then just go earth. And then that gives like a pretty easy search, and then you can just on the next one do fire, click off earth, sort of thing.
Cool. I think
probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's do that. So we'll start with earth.
Then we can do sights all by himself.
Brown bears.
One of the best ordinaries, right? So it's got to be.
It's defining. I mean, we didn't talk about. There is some other stuff to talk about. Maybe we should talk about this a little bit more, or we could maybe flow into it as we're talking about cards. But there is a point about
average power per
why
cost.
They're good. Yeah, so why 4 power is particularly good, and how many cards there are at each power level, and so on. And this is part of the reason why we're only doing Ethereum Legends, because it's way easier to. It's with the limited card pool. It's easier to talk about all the concepts, right? If we said, "Oh yeah," and there's one pack of beta thrown in, it complicates things to no end, basically, right?
Yeah.
So, but 4 power in particular is just, if you look at ordinary. Let's just get the minions for a second, right? Just look at all the ordinary minions. You have the Vikings and the Giant, and that's it. Is that right?
4 power, yeah. And then the Vikings more as well. And then the Lumbering Giant has a drawback, so it's like it's pretty clear that it's like very strong.
So 4 power just dominates.
In general, the good size per costing is like 2 for 2, 3 for 3, 4 for 4. And then if anything's like bigger, or I mean 4 for 4, it's like in AO in particular, it's like 4 for 4 probably has a drawback. Or or like a higher rarity or something like that. But yeah, they're the general sizes where you consider things at like a average value. But then when you look at the minions in this set in particular, 4 at 4 in ordinary with no drawback is clearly above and beyond. Because it beats every 3 drop, beats every 2 drop, and it's like at worst it trades with all the 4 drops and most of the 5 drops. So it sort of just dominates the whole board when you get it out. And because it's a beast, it has great synergy with Pond, so you can get it out even earlier, and then it's like absolutely runs the game in the early to mid.
And also the removal side of things, right? You also care about with the power levels. So
yeah.
You look at the ordinary removals. Arc Lightning actually does do 4 damage, but it's a bit... Because it's nearby... Games always go pretty wide. You can sort of play around it a bit, but ultimately it kills it, right? So, and then outside of that, you've just got Burning Hands, Magic Missiles. You don't really have. There's not good answers to it, and even the Arc Lightning that removes it costs the same as it. So, and potentially they have to move to do it. So they've missed a land drop or drawing a side or whatever to do it.
And then with Jewel and Joust, they also can potentially deal with it, but quite often, because it's so big, they're 2 for 1s themselves, as is, on top of it. So most of the time, the Brown Bears just end up at 2 for 1.
Let's go back to... Yeah, so just establish why Brown Bear... I mean, it's so good. It's so crazy good, and in Limited, obviously, you constructed its... Well, yeah, your Autumn Unicorn, but we're only talking about Limited. So it's very good, and it's certainly first pickable in a pack in draft. It's that good.
Yeah, it's even first pickable in like a strong pack. Like not even just first pickable in like a mediocre or a weak pack. It's like it's probably better than a lot of the exceptionals and even elites as well. Quite often, so it's actually right up there. And like another thing about it is the floor on it is really low, really high as well.
Yeah.
So, well, what we call yeah, I suppose we can.
Well, let's come up with the ratings
ceiling.
now. So, because this can be the baseline, effectively, right? The baseline of the points. It's a good card to use as a baseline, by the way, I think, as well. We got lucky that this was the first one.
Yeah, so really the only drawback to this card is that it's 2 Earth threshold. But Earth's pretty good in AL, so that's not even like a massive drawback.
A lot of people think it's the worst element in
Really?
Limited. Yep. We would disagree, but well, a lot of people think it's terrible. Brown bears are amazing. Yeah, I think it's because those two cards are underrated. It probably would be part of the reason, but
yeah, okay. I mean, to be fair, the depth on the commons for Earth isn't that deep because they're the only good ones, and the rest are not great towards mediocre or bad. So I can see why people think that, but
yeah, I'm thinking floor for this. Well, I'm thinking the ceiling. Let's look at the. I'm thinking the ceiling is like 9. I think that's fair. I don't think we do fractional points because it's going to get too complicated, right? Like we just have to round.
Yeah, I suppose the one thing is, is it just comparing them to all the other ordinaries? Or are we taking other things into consideration as well? Or is it just purely based on...
Well, I think we will want to rate... So my thinking later is that we will rate the cards that are in the card pool only, like the exceptionals, elites, and uniques, just specifically that matter for the purposes of doing the exercise. We won't rate all of them. We'll only do the ones that we come across later on. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
So when we do sealed, we'll rate the ones that are actually in the card pool, but no other ones.
Yeah, because it's like... Because maybe the 9 comes down a little bit when you compare... Like, when all the other of it's in the card pool, because there's things that are stronger, right? So...
Well, you're saying in the 25th best game out of 100 as well. There wouldn't be a lot that would be... There certainly would be. Like, can think of multiple things, but not a lot. To be like... especially because you're factoring into some degree the thresholds here. So whilst you're saying 2 is pretty workable, and if you're picking it up as the first pick in the first pack, you can factor that into your draft, right?
Yeah,
and,
I think
and you
another
can generally make that work. Like whereas Wyvern, for example, that's triple Earth, is it?
No, it's double.
Double as well. Okay, so Reader is triple, right? Where there's other ones that like the thresholds are a bit harder to make
and
work.
The big pig, 5-drop pig is triple as well.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of. So whereas that one is a bit harder to make work, and maybe that affects the floor, right? Basically. Because if you're building especially a tricolor deck, tri-element deck, that you may not even be able to cast that till you have like 10 sites out, potentially. In which case it's not anywhere near as good. So
so the other thing I think we need to consider is like Beast as a type is very strong.
Yep.
Basically,
the potential to synergize is there. So you're not assuming you'll get the pond, but there's potential. The potential exists, and then what you're basically saying is you didn't get the pond, and therefore
or is that part of
comes down.
else?
Sorry, what was that?
What I was thinking is like, does the pond count as like, is that synergy part of the top 25, or is that part of the top 10% sort of thing of games? Like,
I think the answer to that is just how often. What are the chances are that you'll potentially be able to draft it? In the case of Pond, it's ordinary, right? So the potential is there for sure.
Pretty likely.
And then so I think it could be factored into the ceiling, but I don't think you would factor it into the average, like to the middle.
Yeah.
To the median.
So my thoughts is if you factor Pond into the top end, then it is definitely a 9.
And I think you do, because I think at this point in the first pick, and you pick this,
point, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fine.
I mean, I'll just roll. I think the ratings for this are 7, 8, 9 for floor, like whatever you want to call it. Bad game 7, average game 8, good game 9. Kind of is what I'm thinking. And by that, we're literally saying 25th worst game, right?
Yeah, I could see it being 6, 8, 9, but yeah, I wouldn't be upset about a 7, 8, 9. But yeah, because there are the games where you don't hit your double Earth or your pond. Well, and that's that's when it's bad, right? So
Yeah.
but even then, if say your double Earth is your 6th site, it's still pretty solid, which is where it's like a 6, right? Because it's sort of one of those cards that it doesn't really matter what point of the game you play it, it's still going to be large enough that it's going to compete with just about everything that gets played throughout the whole game.
Yeah.
So even then, it's still probably like because if it's like your 6 or your 7 or your 8, turns, it's probably still fine. And then that's more where it's a 6. Whereas if it's like, the average game where you hit your 2 Earth on your your bottom average, I should say, is like, still just above that. It's like, you're probably going to get it on a 4, maybe 5, and then it's still, that's where it's like the 7, the 8. So maybe 6 is
maybe
the floor.
But I would argue, and I'm obviously not going to talk this much about every card because we're still establishing the system at the moment. But
yeah, there's
I
also
would
some
argue
cards
that if you're taking
to agree on this is bad.
I'd argue that if you're taking your first pick brown bears, right, that there is a way higher chance than average that you're going to end up with a deck come the end of it all that is able to get the double Earth threshold, right? Basically.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, that's.
Whereas obviously if you picked up a bunch of water and fire cards and then you get like a 2nd or a 3rd pick brown bears and you end up, there's less chance you're going to end up in 3 elements, right? If you're first picking your brown bears, you're going to try and force, if you can, you're going to try and force more Earth cards, and that.
Yeah, you're going to try and pick up ponds along the way.
Yeah.
You're going to pick up your leprechauns or your common cottages, all those sort of things.
So that would be my argument.
Yeah, probably. Under that argument, I think it is a 7. So
and that's why we're saying 25th worst out of 100, right? Because you're the 25th best game out of 100. Because you're saying if it was,
I wasn't really.
If we shifted that back to
first pick back one
to 10th,
like.
Yeah, this is important why you need to have the criteria, because what I want to do is later on is we say, actually the brown bears floor is now a 6 or a 5 because we don't have enough Earth cards, right? Your argument I want to implement in the situation when it happens, basically, right? And affect the rating of the card. That's So if we say card, I'm just going to put the element there, and we're going to go bad game, average game, good game, yeah?
Yep.
So brown bears, Earth, and we're saying 7, 8, 9,
7, 8, 9. Yep.
It's a good baseline.
Yeah.
Okay. Common cottages.
I have a feeling I'm higher on these this cycle of cards than most people. I think they're actually quite decent. Like, 2 for 2 in this set is about as good as you're going to get at 2 anyway. The fact that you can even play them when they're not your element and they're still just like, get you on board. They can either generate pressure or they can trade with things or team up with like your 3-drop to, trade out with the brown bears to say things like that, is good. And then there's the fact that they give you the fixing, which is very important in this set because quite often, if you end up with a 2-element deck, they're probably less valuable, but they're still alright. But most of the time, you end up with 3, sometimes 4 elements anyway. So in that scenario, they become very good because the no threshold is super important that early in the game, even without the fixing. I think personally, so
I rate them
I'm a big fan of these.
Yeah, and so am I. I mean, there's a few.
I think that changes if you do like a mixed draft, but when it's pure AL, I think these are very good.
Yep, and we are doing a pure AL draft for this exercise.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and obviously the not the Sirs or whatever, the gold cards, even the regular knights, just like Yellow Knight or whatever, the Lance, is it 3/2?
Like the Lance ones. Yeah, or the Black Knight, White Knight, those sort of things. Or the 3/2 Lance.
They're all pretty good. A lot of the actual Sirs are basic game-breakingly good.
They're like bombs, basically.
And picking these up in the draft, when you're not sure, but it gives you the option to potentially snag some of these powerful cards if you happen to get them late on and be able to make it work without compromising your consistency too much.
It also doesn't lock you into anything specific early as well. Which is, you want flexibility when you pick one, pack one. I mean, you're not exactly happy about taking them pick one, pack one, but in a very weak pack, which, there are some very weak print runs, you could potentially take them.
I mean, I think it's a bit hyper. We're just saying it for rating the cards, right? Because it's just probably there's some other card that's going to be higher rated under this system. But in regards to where they could fall in the pack, I mean, I know when we've drafted, I've certainly taken these in like the top sort of pick 5 for sure. Maybe pick 4, maybe even pick 3 in a pretty bad situation. So you're not happy to first pick him. You're probably not happy if you had to second pick him. You're probably not that excited to third pick him. But I think once you're talking fourth pick onwards, you're not that unhappy to end up with these. You're not that excited about it, but you're not that unhappy about it either.
Yeah, I do remember we had one particularly weak draft, and I think in my first 7 picks, I had like 4 cottages, and I was like, that's not great, but it's going to be pretty easy to go whatever element I want, and I ended up being like 4 element Sirs and had a bunch of bombs and went 3-0, and it was like pretty good, because in pack 3, quite often you end up just getting like Sirs that people just can't play. And then if you've got a bunch of cottages for fixing, then all of a sudden you can just play them all, and then it's pretty hard to lose when you get some of the Sirs down on the board.
Yeah, I assume you mean like not all the common cottages, right? Like a mixture of different ones when you're saying that, just to clarify.
Yeah, I don't mean like all 4. It was just like I remember I had like 4 of a mixture of them. So
yeah,
and I don't think it was one of each. It was sort of just like a hodgepodge, but it was like. I was taking them because like the packs were on the weaker side, and it's like they're always going to end up being something that you can play even if they're off color. Because a good thing about them is they're pretty much always never going to be cut from your deck outside of like an incredible draft, and it lets you take sites at a bit more higher premium as well, because you've just got cards because you're going to make up your 24 card. Like main deck very easily, so you can just take sites and then try and get to the point where you're playing no like basic sites, and when that happens you end up getting a lot of extra power and just like eking out advantages that way to sort of like even up the power. You'll bring up your power level by playing cottages and those other sites.
Yep. Yeah, they're just pretty good, and 2 power is pretty good generally, especially there's other stuff, even just general Lance tokens, right? They go pretty well with anything 2 powered, because as we're saying, there's not much that's 4 powered. There's plenty of stuff that's 3 powered. So once you mix a Lance with a 2 powered minion, it can take down a 3 powered minion without dying.
And I mean, even if you just look at the 2 power, the three drops on this in Earth, they're all 2 power, right? So it even just trades with all of these 3s on Earth, like Field Labourers, Tax Collector, trades with all the other 2 drops.
Seems fine. It's very rare that I would be playing a Tax Collector over just one of these, even if you didn't need the elements.
I'm fairly certain I've never played a Tax Collector.
Yeah.
Even though I've considered it, but I think if it was 1 threshold, you could maybe get away with it, because it's not very good, but in like a weak deck you could probably play it. But at 2 threshold, it's like it's hard to cast and it's not very good, sort of. Oof. But we'll get to that guy. So.
Yeah, and importantly, they don't have the thresholds, right? So even if you're not playing Earth at all, like you say, you can still jam it in your deck, and it's probably better than playing the Fisherman's Family or whatever. Is probably better than playing the Tax Collector, right? Even if you don't play water.
Fisherman Family is the other.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Sorry. So even if you have the water one and you don't have any water and you don't even need the threshold, you're probably still playing that over a Tax Collector anyway, right? And probably over Squeakers too. So. Just to put into perspective that these, even if you don't need the threshold symbols, they're better than quite a lot of Wall of Brambles, right? They're better than quite a lot of the ordinary cards.
Yeah.
Even without the threshold symbol, right? And especially if you're playing multiple element decks, there is the factor where they help a lot with the thresholds, but there's also the factor that they help a lot for you to be able to play something on turn 2. Because it doesn't have any threshold symbols, so it doesn't matter what side you draw. You can always play. You can always make a play, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier as well. Yeah. I think that's a very big part of why they're good and very underrated about them.
So now it's just all right. So it's almost another baseline rating, really, because it's a cycle of 4.
And with all that said, it's probably just 555 almost.
Almost. I mean, well, the
Like, no,
ceiling,
maybe,
I think...
maybe the ceiling's a bit higher.
The ceiling
because
is
of
a
the
bit
fixing.
higher, especially if you end up...
There are games where they're absolutely crucial, so maybe it's like 556. Because
Yeah,
it feels like
think so.
their
I think that's
average bad game is about as good as their average game, and that's just when they're just a 2-cost dude you can just jam that just does a trade out. But where they get good is where you actually need the fixing, which is probably just pushes it up that little bit more.
Yeah. The reason why I've not used column A, by the way, is because I'll end up zooming in on this a bit, and you'll miss the left column. That makes sense. That's why. The left side of the screen won't be visible. Let's just pre-populate that one a bit.
There's 9 Earth cards. Did you go down to 9? One more. You need 2 more Earth.
Okay. 556, yeah?
Oh no, there's 11 Earth cards. I thought it was 5 wide. It's 6 wide.
Okay.
And yeah, 556 seems fine to me.
Jewel gets a lot better
this is,
than the biggest stuff you have, that's for sure.
Yeah, this is one of those cards that I think like when it's bad, it's really bad, but when it's good, it's really good, sort of thing. And because it's Earth, it's probably a little bit better than it could be because like Earth has generally more fatties, but definitely not in the common slot. It's just the brown bears in the common slot, but they pair amazingly well with brown bears because brown bears beats just about everything. So
yeah, and then once you throw up land stoke on your brown bears, it pretty much literally beats everything just about, right? As well.
Yeah, it's like uniques only at that point, I think. Is that true?
Yeah,
Probably.
I think so.
Yeah, because oh no, so there's the Mestor Stormworm at Elite that it doesn't beat because that guy's massive. But yeah, realistically, it beats just about everything.
Pretty good. I mean, it becomes, if you end up with that, which I've had before, you end up in that draft where you had, 5 brown bears or something, and in that draft, it's amazing. Like it's just insane. If you literally have, I think I had a draft where I had 4 or 5 brown bears and a couple the lumbering giants and a couple Vikings, and I had like multiple jousts and multiple jewels, and it was just insane, basically. Like,
but there are plenty of games where you're just sitting there with a bunch of 2-powered minions like your cottages and your leprechauns and things like that, and if you ever have to 2-for-1 yourself with this card, it starts to feel real bad. But sometimes you just got to do it. And they're the games where it feels pretty bad, right? And then there's the average games where... Actually, it doesn't even really feel like there's middle-of-the-road games for this card. It always just feels like it's either just straight up killing a minion and yours isn't dying, or you're 2-for-1ing yourself with this card, which... So maybe there isn't even a medium for this card. It's just good or bad.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it is still you potentially get to... do the rest of a draft here, or however you want to put it. I don't know how you say it.
The fact that it kills on death's door is potentially the only reason why it even has like a middle game.
That's not
because it sort of brings up like the bad up to like you potentially might not have been able to finish them off without it, sort of thing. So
when you're never picking this card, well, we aren't anyway. It's something that you just end up in the last, whatever it is, last 5 picks sort of thing. You end up with it. We never really... Well, that's not... Save for the draft where you got a whole bunch of fatties already. Yeah, you're probably more happy to take the jewel like way higher. But ordinarily, this is something that...
It's generally a card you're not upset to have in your deck, but you're generally not that happy to take it when you're picking cards.
No.
That's how I always feel about this card.
I mean, is it something like floor is 2... Ceiling is like...
Yeah, I think that maybe it's like a 3. I'd say 3. Because there's always the fact that it can kill them on death's door. And if you're in like a really bad spot, sometimes you just have to 2-for-1 yourself just to deal with some like bomb sort of thing. And in that scenario, you're like, sure, it didn't feel good, but I got rid of their really important thing. So I think it's probably a 3.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm looking.
Sometimes you just got to do it, and sometimes you just need playables, and it's never really a card you're upset to have in your deck. So I think 3 is fine, but yeah, I'd say the top end is probably like 8 or 9. Then the average game is probably not much, like 4 maybe, because it's not that much better than a bad game when it's average.
Yeah,
but when it's good, it's good.
Yeah, you can certainly have a debate if that maybe should be a 5, but I'm not gonna. Because we're here forever. We'll be here forever if we
Yeah, for the sake of time, we can't really be like arguing.
If it's within a reasonable amount of percentage points here, we're just going to concede it. Field laborers.
Yeah, it's a card I generally like to play, but the deck has to really need it. Like, you either need like 6 drops realistically, and sometimes you get some pretty good ones, but then you're normally ending up with issues with the thresholds because this guy's double earth, and if most of the 6s are probably either double threshold or something, or like gold, so that's potentially an issue. For even if you do have the 6, you still can't play the right card that you want to play.
That threshold is a big deal. It's also
pretty easy to be picked off. So if you have like, that's actually another reason why cottages are,
I've never played the field laborers, but there's been a couple of times where I think I would have played it but the double threshold was just a deal breaker.
Yeah. Like, there's the times when I've played it, majority of the time it's been pretty solid, but the problem with it is once you don't need the mana, it's just a 3 power 2 drop, that's hard to cast, which feels pretty awkward.
2 power, yeah, you said 3 power 2 drop, but you meant 2 power 3 drop.
Yeah, the other way around, yeah. So that's pretty awkward. Yeah, it's not.
I mean, the floor on this is ridiculously low.
Yes. Yeah. Yep, that's definitely one way to put it. But and then the ceiling and the top end is like not out of this world crazy either. So it's,
and also the average game is also probably pretty bad. Because the thing is, in order to be able to basically get the most out of this, you got to play it as your 3 drop. And
you sort of have to, it forces you into playing like a backline site to your side, most likely. Sometimes you can just play it on your starting location, and that's safe enough if you had like a 2 as well. Or even like the earth site that makes the soldiers. Maybe that's enough to keep it protected for the 1 turn to get your 6 drop out straight away and then just run the game that way. That's sort of like most likely the best case scenario.
Yeah,
which,
but that's not out. That's
could be
not
good enough to just win you a game, but it's not like.
But that's also not the 25th best in 100 games, right? That's more like the 5th best in 100 games. That situation, right, where you basically get to play it as your 3 drop. So it's like under our ranking system, there's not a ceiling as such, right? Just the good game is in the 25th best out of 100. Even that's not going to be particularly high. I wouldn't have imagined.
Yeah, a lot of the times that's probably going to be like your turn 6 is. Like, I mean, your turn 4 is probably 2 more 3 drops, or like a brown bears and a 2 drop, or something like that, which is, fairly solid. But is it enough that it was worth skipping your 3? That's questionable. So yeah, it's probably on the low end. Like, even the top end is not super high.
Yeah, is it like a 6 maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
The top end is a 6.
Probably, what is it? It's 2 or 2 or maybe it's 2, 4, 6, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, could probably argue plus or minus 1 on bad or average, but just in the sake of trying to make this not a 7-hour video, probably 2, 4, 6 is good enough.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like it's still a minion, right? So unlike some other stuff that can just literally be a dead card, you literally can't do anything with. At least you can just still jam this on the plate. You draw it late in the game. You don't need the mana. You don't need anything. It's quite often it's just going to be the same as having drawn a common cottages or whatever instead, right? So late in the game.
Yeah, I suppose that's one thing we should mention in AO in particular. You do get some drafts where you're just desperate for minions in general, and that's where these guys sort of probably going to make your deck, regardless of if you needed the ramp. And that's the sort of situation where the cottages, like that family of cards, is just better. I think that's why we both value them a little bit higher as well. Because like you do just get those decks where you're just short on minions and you just need stuff.
Yeah.
Need bodies.
Green Sparrow.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever played it in any of the drafts that we've done or sealed.
I think I've played it in that scenario that I was just talking about, right? Where I was desperate for bodies. I might have had like a sword and shield in the deck, so that's like, it's a pretty good unit for carrying it because airborne. So, you can suit it up, start getting in for 3 pretty early. In that scenario, it's like not great, but it's if you're desperate for just minions, it's it's better than a Squeakers.
Yep. Well, I've never played a Squeakers either, though. So
I've played Squeakers when I've drafted like the full suite of reveal minions, and it's more about just giving the 5-drop charge than it is trying to hit the Pigs of the Sounder off of it. And in that scenario, when you have like 1 or 2 of those guys, it's fine. Like you can play 1 or 2, but outside of that, you're not going to.
It's a bit of a weird one as well, because where it's best is obviously early game, but also that's when you're likely to never get the life out of it.
One thing, it's like if you're on the play, it can sort of pressure a Robin, but if you're on the draw, it also can't pressure a Robin, so that feels a bit awkward.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Earth in general doesn't have many great answers to deal with the Robin outside of Jewel. Which is, that's where Jewel's not pretty nice, because you can actually just beat Robin with basically any minion. So yeah, it's never good. The bad games, it's obviously just going to be like a 1 power, 1 drop, which, there's only a couple of those you ever really want to play. It's certainly no Robin or Sly Fox, let's put it that way.
I mean, the floor's got to be pretty low.
Yeah, it's got to be low.
The average game is it 3? Even 3-4-5 feels a bit generous.
I feel like it's 2-3-3 almost.
Yeah. All right, I'm not going to argue that. All right, Kettletop Leprechaun.
This card's absolutely incredible. This is like, I don't know, I value it up towards Brown Bears. I think if it was, I would still take the Brown Bears over it, but they're not that far apart, in my opinion, in pure power level. Just getting extra sights is, because there's like almost no card draw, right? In the whole set at Ordinary. Is there any other? Surely there is, but none that I can think of.
I'll note it when we get there, not that I can think of.
Yeah. And yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to tweak onto how good this guy is with how often I'm seeing 4 of these show up in constructed decks.
Yeah.
Now. As soon as this card came out, I'm like, this card's great. I'm a big fan of this card. And yeah, it hasn't waned. It's only gone up in popularity, and in my eyes as well. I think the card's great.
Well, when the set came out, that was at season... Can't even think. What season of the league just finished? Can't even remember. The one that I won? I should know the number. Was it 7? 8?
You won 8.
I
won...
Yeah.
Yeah, I won the
so
one.
So in the previous season...
7 was the one before. Yeah.
7, I think? So when that one was the one that...
I think it came out before that, though, right? Didn't it?
That was the first season with the Thurian Legends in it. I think.
Oh, yeah. So it would have come out in the season before, but then legal to play in the season, you mean?
Yeah. And that was when it was right near the end of the season, and I was like, "You're gonna help me build?" Like, we quickly built a deck for me to play, and we built that Geomancer deck
with Stone Rain's Leprechauns and
yeah. And then when I was playing the full Leprechauns in that deck, and it was just totally out of the meta. Everyone I played was like, "Oh, Leprechaun's so bad." Like, how do you win with this deck? It's so terrible. And like, I went
8-0.
Yeah, I went 8-0 with it, yeah, in the online league, off the back of everybody telling me every single game how bad the deck was. So, but yeah, so that was straight after it came. That was as soon as it came out. We were like, straight away, Leprechaun's solid, really good.
Yeah.
And now, only now, like it's quite a long time later, like way over 6 months later.
When did AL come out? End of last year?
End of last year. Maybe it's not way over 6 months later, but it's like 6 months later. And now people are catching on to it, basically now. It's starting to appear in deck lists and stuff quite a bit. It's pretty good.
Yeah, so basically the flaw for this card is when you draw it when you've drawn like 10 sites for the game, because the game's gone really long, and then you just jam it, and it's like, well, this is pretty irrelevant.
Yeah.
And then, but yeah, that's pretty rare.
But then it's just like a common cottages or a whatever, right? It's like all these other 2-drops basically at that point. But even then, it's still not all bad, because potentially you've got a good side in your deck, and digging one site deeper might get you to whatever
or
that
you've got
is,
a Stone
right?
Rain in your hand, or all sorts. Or they've got a Troll Bridge, and you can discard it to that. Things like that. So
even late, it's not. I mean, obviously, sometimes it'll be irrelevant, but sometimes it will still be quite relevant drawing that site, even way into the game. So, but again, like, how many games drag on really long like that, combined with you also happening to draw the Leprechaun at that point in the game? Because we're saying it's the 25th, it's the bottom. Yeah. It's that game sitting in that slot.
I do remember one of our drafts. I think I had 4 of them in my deck, and I actually couldn't play. I think my last 1 or 2 of them, because I'd drawn every site. So
okay.
And it was this is a bit awkward. But that's even below like the 25th that we're talking about, right? That's like in the bottom 5% of games. So that's actually
maybe
happen,
1%.
Yeah. So that's
But that's where where I was going at the start, right? Because if you say you play 100 games and you talk about floor and ceiling, what's the best and the worst? Basically, every card's a 10 and every card's a 1, right?
Yeah.
So that's just why we're trying to define it this way. But I would say, I don't know, this is really good. I would say,
I'd say the bottom is probably 1 higher than whatever we put Brown Bears. The middle is probably about the same as a Brown Bears, and the top's probably a little bit lower than a Brown Bears.
Tom, you think the
because
floor...
Brown Bears can sort of run the whole game.
Yeah, you said the bad game is 1 higher than Brown Bears, but you meant 1 lower, right?
No, I meant 1 higher. Because when it's... Oh, yeah, no. So what I was thinking is like... Yeah, no, I probably said that wrong.
I'm pretty good at spelling, but not words that I never...
This always gets me.
How do you spell leprechaun?
I'm like, where's that page?
Leprechaun. There we go.
Leprechaun.
Right. So I think we could... Is it a 6?
Is it 688? Because I don't think it's like
game.
its top end is as good as a Brown Bears, but it's.
I think 688 is fair
because it can't run the whole game, right? But if you drop it on 2, you trade with one of their 2s, you get a site like it replaces itself. It really helps you curve out well, so it still does like. Help
quite often
when you grab it in the early game. Because quite often they just refuse to trade with it, right? And it just ends up being a 2-powered unblockable minion, which is still pretty good. Or you just leave it there as a blocker if you're playing like a slower deck, and then they can't really attack. So then they're like, they don't want to kill it, so they're just chilling, and you're just buying this whole time that way.
Yep.
So it still does quite a bit.
And there's big section typically of the game, like... I don't know how many turns in, but you could still potentially be drawing a side at the start of your turn, even on turn 7 or 8, conceivably.
Yeah, there's sometimes where you just want to play 2 of your other cards in the same turn.
In any of those games...
is the tempo worth losing a card? And sometimes it is, and that just fixes that, so...
Yeah. And it's basically the same as almost saying, it's... If you were to draw a side at the beginning of your turn after that, whatever point in the game is... As long as the Leprechaun dies before that point, this is basically the same as drawing a spell in a way, right? because it's saving you from having to draw that side at the beginning of your turn. So,
yep.
Right, rescue.
Yeah, this is one. It's always that like 25th or 26th card for me. So it always sort of just ends up getting cut, but is always one of the last few cards to cut from my deck. So it's not like it's unplayable, and basically, the better your deck is, the better the card gets. But at the same time, it's also hard to get this in, to keep it in. So it's like, if you have like 23 amazing cards, this card is easily a 24th card over like an average card, right? But that scenario doesn't come up that often. Double Earth. I think if this was single Earth Threshold, it would be so much more playable.
Because the thing
is, single Earth Threshold, it just starts synergizing really well with all the gold minions.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's probably why it is double Earth Threshold. But yeah, I think the more Sirs and stuff you have in your deck that you can easily cast, the better this card gets if you can handle the double Earth Threshold. So that's a lot of ifs to make this card good. So I think like the top end is probably alright, but the floor has got to be like, man, it's got to be right down there.
Like, I mean, it's basic, potentially 1, right? And we're not saying floor, we're saying, the bottom, the 20, again, like a bad game, But even if you look at it like that, I mean, at this point you're saying you don't know what the rest of your deck's going to be. Of course, this is more of a card where, once everything's manifested to your deck is coming together and you have 5 gold Sirs and a reader or something, or a friggin' Morgana, like you have some crazy shit you can bring back with it, and all of a sudden that floor could move from like a 1 or a 2 all the way up to a friggin' 6 or something, right?
I mean, if you've got a reader in your deck, then it's almost an auto include at that point, because you're triple Earth Thresholding, so you and you're only going to be wanting to get something back once you've got the triple Earth Threshold. So at that point, it's like, let's go. But but
even if you've got all sorts of cool stuff to bring back with it, there'll still just be that game where like you're on the back foot, you're losing, it's the only card in your hand, there's nothing you can do with it. If it was any other card in your deck, you wouldn't have lost.
Yeah, or it's just like a little bit too slow, or you're having those games where you're far enough ahead, but you can't quite close it out, and any other trick or even just another minion might have been good enough to get you there, sort of thing. But
is 2-3-6? Does that sound? That's where my feeling is landing with this.
I feel like 6 is too high.
2-3-5.
Yeah, probably. I mean, 2 almost feels too high, but that's probably a bit unfair.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as the rest of your card, you can move from a 2 to a 1, right, with specific card pools. So, there are certainly cards way less playable than this. Let's put it that way in the set.
Yeah.
So,
like the next 4 cards.
Yeah. Well, I've played Squire a couple times. It is in the specific. Yeah, I don't know. Again, it's let's get to the Squire when we get to the Squire. Squeakers.
Yeah. I think it's just those situations, like I was saying earlier, where the only time it's ever really worth playing is if you have the 5-drop in your deck. I think maybe if you had like 2 or 3 of the 3-drop, then you just jam every Squeakers you got. And then they're probably pretty good. But it's not an easy deck draft.
No, and they're not even ordinary. Like it'd be, they're exceptional, right?
Yeah, they're uncommon, and the other one's elite. I've done it a couple of times, and it's been. I don't think I've ever pulled it off, and I've managed to draft it a couple of times, so it's a bit awkward. But it's more just the fact that it can give the 5-drop charge. So I think if you just have the 5-drop in your deck, and you picked up a Squeakers somewhere 13th or 15th pick, there's a good chance it can just end up in your deck. But if you had like a very playable card, you wouldn't cut it for a Squeakers. Like you would never cut any Cottages, like that sort of card for a Squeakers. But if you had to play like a suboptimal card, like a Rescue or any of the other cards we're about to talk about, or like a Grain Sparrows or a Field Labourers in an awkward deck, I think it's probably playable in that scenario. But that's
but the odds of getting
one of the
the
only
Grand
ones.
Old Boar, is it Grand Old Boar? Is that what it is?
Yeah. It's
The odds of getting that, obviously, even if you're willing to first pick it whenever you may see it, you're probably not going to see it because it's elite. So
yeah, because it doesn't get opened in every drop, right? It's not one of those cards.
and it's not a terrible card for other people to pick. Really, it's pretty solid, right? Like it's not a card you'd expect is going to go
it's like a
second
bigger
pick or something.
Bears with a harsher like casting condition because it's 3 Earth.
I mean,
so.
And it's certainly,
But it's not one of like, so the thing with the Grand Old Boar is it's not one of those cards that someone's just gonna like hate draft because it's strong or valuable sort of thing. It's more, and it's not something that someone's gonna take and potentially splash it like a Brown Bears. If they've got like a few other Earth cards, so maybe they can stretch. Like no one's stretching their mana base to play the Grand Old Boar. So it's not like if it does get opened, it's probably getting taken by the first person who's in a decent amount of Earth. And, you know, if there's only 3 people on the table, there's like a chance that it's you. So,
yeah, but ultimately, none of what we're talking
wonder.
about is going to fall under that 25th best game at this point, right? When you don't even necessarily have the ball or anything. So, I mean, this is 3 really low numbers that feel all lower than the Grain Sparrow. I'd rather play a Grain Sparrow over Squeakers.
It's 0.
Yeah, well, there's a question which we didn't
don't want it in
quantify.
your deck
What's the lowest score that you give a card at this point? I mean,
I think 0 has to be a card, right? It's a card that you're never willing to play in the bad scenarios.
yeah, well, yeah, but at this point, it's still theoretical, right? Like,
Or is it a 1 just because it was in your deck? And
it's a 1 at this point, potentially, just because you don't know what the rest of the cards will be. So there's still the theoretical possibility that you get the Grand Old Boars. But maybe the thing is, there probably still are. I would rather play a Squeakers than a Wall of Brambles, probably.
Yeah, but I'd say that card's a 0 as well. I'd say Tax Collector's a 0 as well.
Yeah, but maybe.
So my thinking is like Thankless Squire is probably a 2, but I still think it's better than Squeakers.
Yeah, all right. So let's go with 0.
Like I think the average of this is probably 1.
Yeah. And even a good
And then
game,
when it's good,
is it 2 at this point?
maybe.
Is it 1 or 2? It's certainly not as good as Grain Sparrow, which we gave 3.
Yeah, it's probably 1 still.
It's pretty bad, right?
Because like the only time it's ever going to be better than a 1 is if you're hitting the 3 drop off of it, or it's giving the big 1 charge.
Yeah,
and that's less than 20, like the top 25, like
exactly.
25% of game,
Yep.
right? So
at this point, it is,
yeah. One, right?
If we do a draft and you happen to draft 2 or 3 of those other cards, then all of a sudden, all those numbers change drastically. Yeah, those numbers have to be completely modified, which we'll get to when we do it, right? So, Tax Collector.
I don't think we need to talk about this guy too long. He's the same stats and casting and all that of a Field Labourers with basically no upside. Like if you play him on 3, the tempo you generate by them not being able to potentially cast their 3 drop is completely negated by the fact that you just played a guy who's effectively a 2 drop anyway.
Yeah, it's just a bit bad. And they gave, unlike the Field Labourer, like with the Field Labourers, at least you can build a deck around it a bit. This guy, exactly. You can't even really
generate a lot more tempo with it.
So even if this guy had 1 Earth Threshold, he'd still be really bad. It's also not seen him played in Constructed. I think he's just really bad, basically. I think
it feels like it's one of those cards that maybe it said 2, or maybe he was 3 power, and then last second he got nerfed and became completely unplayable.
Yeah.
I think it's like a 0-1-1 as well. Like, unlike Rescue, that's a card that where like you're happy, like you're not upset if it ends up in your deck. If Tax Collector ends up in your deck, you should be upset.
Thankless Squire, don't know about this one. I mean, Lance tokens are pretty good.
Yeah.
Right, so it does give you 3 of those. I'd rather play him probably than a Tax Collector and a Wall of Brambles and a Squeakers.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But that said, I'd still
Grain
not a
Sparrow,
huge fan of
probably. I'd rather play the Grain Sparrow.
Move is the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Even if it said he couldn't attack, maybe that's okay. It's probably better because you don't really want to break 3 lances on one attack. But the fact that he's immobile and can't move to where your minion is so that they can get off a good attack, it's literally you have to cast him to a spot where your minion is, and then try and launch every one of your attacks from that spot for the next 3 attacks.
It's a bit too awkward.
Which feels really awkward. Or potentially you have to drop an artifact to a different minion, and then that minion carries it to the other minion, and then that minion
so much worse
one.
than the other squires. It's crazy how much worse he is.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if he cost 3 like the other squires, then he would be good, right? And the drawback of a mobile would actually be acceptable.
Feels like he had a tax collector done on him. He was different at some point, and actually they got scared and just did some massive nerf at the last minute. Let's make him immobile and increase the cost by 2.
Yeah.
That'll make sure it's not abusable, and instead it's unplayable. Almost. Well, like I said, I would rather play it than some of this other stuff.
Yeah, it's like a 1/2/2 instead of a 0/1/1, right? Because it's like, maybe that's unfair. Maybe it's what 2/2.
I mean, at the end of the day, you can still play him where something that you have is transfer the lance to kill something with a potential. That's pretty easy to pull off. It's just the rest of it that becomes a bit questionable after that.
Yeah. I think
But, paying 5 mana for a lance token effectively under that circumstance where,
and that's probably the best it gets, right? That's the top end.
Yeah.
Is paying 5 for a lance token. That's expensive. A lance token that doesn't generate a blocker, right? Because all the other squires, they at least generate a 1 power blocker. This one just doesn't at all.
Yeah. Is this average 2 or 1?
I think the average 1.
Yeah, so
because it's going to be worse more than it's good.
It's quite a bit better than the Squeakers and the Tax Collector, still.
Yes, so it starts with a 1.
Right. Is this a 0/0/0? Wall of Rambles?
I think it's 0/0/1.
I just can't even imagine ever playing this to even find out how you get a 1.
There's the scenario which I think comes up more often than nothing, is you draw you draft a slow deck. And you place your sights across the back, and then you have your 1 forward and then across the back. Yeah. And then if you jam the Wall of Brambles, it basically stops any of their early minions from attacking. And then if you have that on that side, they play a Brown Bears. All you have to do is basically play any 2-power minion. Say you play a Leprechaun, you're sweet. They're never attacking into that with a Brown Bears, right? And making that trade. So there's some pretty fringe scenarios where it's not bad and actually okay-ish, but overall that's that might even be above that 25% mark that we're talking about, right? So but that is the scenario where it's not shit. And in that scenario it's way better than a Thankless Squire.
Yeah,
but it probably is.
And is it just 0/0?
The way we're rating it, 0/0/0. I think.
Yeah, and then potentially, like you're saying, under this specific weird.
Yeah, I just sort of wanted to say there's fringe scenarios where it's okay, but it is effectively it is a 0/0/0 realistically. And I think that's probably why people think Earth isn't great, right? Because if you look at it, we just rated a lot of cards completely undraftable, right? Those are undraftable. Field Labourers and Grain Sparrow are pretty bad. And Rescues in that category. Sure, you've got 2 of the best commons in the whole set. And then you've got a Cottages, which doesn't come into consideration because everybody has access to those. And then Jewel. So realistically, there's only 3 Earth cards that you even want to draft. But 2 of them, potentially, you want to draft above every other ordinary in the whole set. So maybe that's why we think Earth's good.
Yeah, and it's not all just about the ordinaries. The exceptionals matter quite a bit as well for the draft.
That was my next point I was going to make. Maybe it's just we are thinking about the exceptionals too. But yeah, because I haven't really gone through in this sort of setup and just worked out what every card is.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up this first episode here. So thanks for watching. And just to be clear, this episode, it's just the beginning of what's going to be a very long and epic series. It's episode 1 of part 1 in our 4-part series, and there's 4 more episodes in this first part alone, and we've already recorded them and they're good to go, so to speak. So we'll be releasing 2 episodes in this series each week. So if you're interested in this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you get notified when we release them. And I'd pledge to you with this series that if you watch it in its entirety and you put the ideas into practice, that you will become a much stronger Sorcery Contested Realm Limited player, and you'll also improve your constructed deck building skills as well. So if you're interested in getting better at the game, then make sure that you go through this series, through this journey and with us, and we're excited about it, and we'll see you in the next episode. So keep safe, keep well, and keep enjoying your sorcery. Until then, cheers.